So now we're moving to the good bit for the landlord. This is the rent. This is the income you get for the investment that you've made. You've got a couple of choices here. Firstly, we've got to put in a rent amount. Now, rent amounts are generally under the commercial lease, or you decide it, you negotiate on a yearly basis. So let's say 200,000 a year is the rent. Plus GST, because I'm registered for GST, so it's $220,000. I divide that by 12, and that brings me to $18,333.33. And that's a pretty common figure to have 33 cents in these leases. So I'm now getting, inclusive GST, $18,333.33, and that's what I expect to get. Now, with the bond amount, what's the bond? Let me just refresh my memory. The bond is the money that is put aside so that if something goes wrong, you, the landlord, can draw from it. Now, under a Retail Shops Act and under a residential lease, you've got restrictions, but you don't have restrictions with a commercial lease. The parties, the landlord and tenant, are deemed to be at arm's length, big and ugly boys, each of them, and they can fight it out. So what we've seen is that most bonds are between 1 to 6 months. 6 months is a bit heavy here. No, I'm going to have a bond of 6 months. So that's 110,000. That's how much I want. Oh, come on, Professor Davies, that's a bit heavy. Look, I'm paying a good rent. Do you think you could knock that down to 2 months just worth a bond? I'm a bit short. Look, Colin, you're a decent chap, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to just make it 2 months, which is 36,666 and 67 cents. You notice that GST has quietly got into these amounts. So now I'm expecting to get, as the landlord, 18 odd thousand, and I'm going to put aside 36 and a half odd thousand for the bond. But this lease might be, now might have a lease that's 5 plus 5 plus 5. And you know what that means because you've watched the other training courses. It's a 5-year lease with 5-year option, with one 5-year option, another 5-year option. So we need to have some rent review dates. I think that's fair. You could press no, I don't want a rent review. And if your lease is only 1, 2 or 3 years, maybe you're not that fussed about a rent review, but I am. So I want a rent review, and I've got some choices here. Because it's free negotiation in a commercial lease, I can decide what's right. So in this example, I've set a rent review date to be on that date, 14th of March 2029, and I've got it increasing by the percentage increase of 5.2. So whatever happens, if the rent was, and what was the rent again? 18, well, we know it was 220,000, 18,000 odd a month. So we're going to increase that by 5.2%, and that will be the new amount. It's fixed. It's a really easy sort of thing, but it may not, and it's good for the tenant because the tenant can budget for this. But I'm a bit worried. I'm going to have a rent review every 2 years. Every 2 years, not every 1 year. I've decided every 2 years. And at the end of the second year, after this first rent review, I want it to be at Consumer Price Index, a CPI, or a percentage. And I'm going to make this 4.9%. Now, this means that if the Consumer Price Index has gone up by 6%, then I'll get 6%. But if the Consumer Price Index has only gone up by 4%, if only, then I would still get my 4.9%. It's the higher. It's whichever is the higher of the two. You don't like that. You don't want that. You feel it's fair to go back to current market rent. All right, well, we'll put that in. If so, back 2 years later, the lease is still going. I'm now going to have the rent increased to current market rent. If the current market rents drop to negative, which does happen, or the Consumer Price Index is negative, is a ratchet clause in the legal consolidated commercial leases, it won't go below zero. Now, with current market rent, it means that you will firstly go to the tenant and say, look, we think the market rent now is $280,000 plus GST. And the tenant might say, look, I think I've done a bit of a quick look and I agree with that. Or it might be the case that he disagrees or she disagrees or it that disagrees, in which case you together will have to pay for a valuation, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000, what we see in the marketplace, and that will be the valuer acting as an expert, and from that point on, that will be the current market rent. So there's your rent, and there's your rent review. Now, if you want to have another one, just add another one. So you might put whatever date you want in there. Plenty of hints here. Which method of rent review is best, and we go through it all. You need to work that out. And obviously, you've got to wheel and deal with your tenant because you'll be putting in the best you can. You will prepare this commercial lease. You will give it to the tenant. If they don't sign it, then obviously you don't tell the tenant this, but we'll update it for free until you're satisfied with it. But you really want to give it to the tenant as a fait accompli. They often just sign it, and that's kind of good. Oh, Professor Davies, you seem to be a bit biased towards the landlord. Yes, because they're paying me. The tenant's got their own lawyer looking after them. I'm looking after you, the landlord. That's what I'm doing. I'm looking after you as the landlord. The tenant has to have their own legal advisors if they want, and they're not my problem. The lawyer is required to act for the best interest of its client, and in this case, the landlord is our client. So next, we'll be moving to outgoings.